So my name is Brooke Kent, and I've helped executives and professionals for the last 20 plus years with their resumes and LinkedIn profiles and interview strategies. And it is my pleasure to have Ellen Fay join us for today's webinar. Before I let Ellen introduce herself, I wanted to let you know that we'll save the last 15 to 20 minutes for your questions at the end. So please feel free to drop those in the chat, or when we get to the question period, feel free to unmute yourself and ask those questions, and we'll make sure we get those answered. Like I said, I am recording today's webinar, and I'll send you guys the link to that once it's available. And I'll also email you an infographic that summarizes kind of the key takeaways from the webinar. So Ellen, would you mind introducing yourself? You have been such a delight for me personally to work with as a certified productivity and leadership coach. I've told everyone in the email that you've appeared on CNN and in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and everywhere else. But tell us a little bit about yourself, and if our guests wanted to follow up with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So my website is my website's ellenfay.com. My email is ellen@ellenfay.com. You have my name in front of you. So I welcome just questions, anything I can do to support you.
Thank you so much.
Sure. I came to productivity via an interesting path. I was in the hospitality industry for my first career, and I worked like 90, 100 hours a week, and it just was not healthy. But no matter what I did, that was just the nature of the beast. And I left before I had my first child because I didn't want that. I felt it was kind of toxic, to be polite. So when my kids were a little older, I said, if I'm going back to work, and if I'm going to work that hard, I'm going to work for myself. So what can I do? So I started out as a professional organizer. I knew it was like I could have total autonomy and control. I was good at it. It came naturally. I'd figure it out. And within a couple years, so that was 2001. So I'm almost hitting 20 years too. Within a couple of years, I was organizing. I was doing business organizing. I started with my clients who were running home-based businesses, then started doing entrepreneurs. And, you know, when you're in something 19 years, it just naturally evolves. So I was really just doing small business organizing and all of that. And then I went and got trained in 2009 and became a certified coach in 2011. And then I had 7 years on the national board of my professional association, which gave me a whole different exposure to how to work virtually in this era. Came back, and then I've been doing full-time productivity coaching for the last few years. And my clients are very diverse, but I work with people who aren't afraid of hard work, but want to work smarter, more effectively. And really, I help them adapt systems that fit themselves. I know we're going to talk about that today, how one size does not fit all. That applies across the board to calendaring, tasks, everything you do, we have to find your solution. So that's what I help my clients do.
Well, that brings us right into the first question, that we wanted to start off with. And I had emailed everyone a notes or outline sheet. Feel free to use that as we kind of go through. But the first question I wanted to talk about is, in today's world, does having a strategic plan for your job search even matter? And I wanted to start by just giving a few numbers, and then I'll turn it over to Ellen. So the average American will change jobs 12.3 times over the course of his or her career. So if you are job searching or job changing, take heart, because you are not alone. It is something that all of us will go through multiple times in our career. So with that in mind, what do the studies tell us about the effect of having a strategic plan? So the first study was a study of 1,100 job seekers, and they found that people who put together a strategic plan for their job search were 30% more likely to receive a job offer and 26% more likely to become reemployed over the course of the study. So that obviously is very beneficial. A separate study looked at people who had a focused job search strategy, and it found that they received 23% more job offers than people who had a haphazard job search strategy. And in fact, the bottom line of the study was that the more focused job search strategy the people used, the higher the number of job offers they received. And then the last study looked at people who kind of proactively planned their job search, and it found that not only did they receive more job offers, but the job offers they received were for more money and at more satisfying positions. So that's kind of what the science tells us. But I want to dive into what you think, Ellen, based on your own experience. Let's start with the basics. Is a job search similar to or different from kind of our normal, productivity approach and tasks that we would normally have? When we're job searching, is it similar? Is it different? Or what's the same and what's different?
So I'm so happy to report that my experience matches the data.
Okay.
So, people think the best reason to have a strategic plan is so they can have a plan.
Right.
And it's great to have a plan, but the real benefit comes from making the plan because it forces you to narrow your scope and get clear on what it is you want to do. And the process of creating that is most beneficial. I have clients that we create plans and then they said to me, I didn't even look at it. But when I went back at the end to check it, I did everything exactly. So there are people that want to reference it on all the time basis. There's other people that the very fact of creating it.
Right. Getting that mental clarity.
They get very clear.
Right. And so is there anything about a job search that's kind of different from, our normal productivity tasks or challenges? Is there any special challenges we should be aware of when it comes to job searching?
I think what's most important is the shift in perspective that it's not just you trying to convince a company that you are right for them. It's equally you're assessing if that company is right for you. Because it's a big deal to start a new job. You don't want to, you want it to be one that gives you joy and fulfilling and pleasure, that you don't mind spending 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, whatever it is, 45 maybe, working at. So getting clear on what you want will really help you not make a mistake.
So I know you said that you were so glad that your actual personal experience in working with clients or family matched up with what the overall data said about the effectiveness of making a plan. Can you tell us about maybe a friend or family member or client that you helped, create that strategic plan? What was the effect? What was the before versus, the after? Did it make a difference for them?
I have one long-term client she's in product innovation, so she gets jobs and then loses, when she's innovated the product, she loses that job. And this has been going on for years and years. But she has no strategy at all. And she doesn't want one.
Okay.
And yet she wastes a lot of time interviewing for the wrong positions, following the wrong leads.
Okay.
Whereas I was just telling Brooke before we started, both of my kids, they're in their 20s, got new jobs during the pandemic.
Right.
And of course, I'm their mother, so they did have plans, and they did, Mom, look at my resume, check my cover. They were like, at least they had the sense to ask, right?
Yes.
But, just working through with them so that they were clear on their approach.
Right.
And like I said, they both got like really great opportunities during the pandemic. So getting clear just saves you so much time in the long run. You don't waste as much time. It's faster and it's better fit.
Well, I think that is very encouraging for, anyone who's listening who did also lose their job in their pandemic through no fault of their own, that there is hope, and that perhaps having, taking the time to get mentally clear and figuring out what the approach, should look like for finding a job that's really fulfilling, that it can work, as your two kids, have proven. So let's dive into kind of the 4 steps that we're going to talk about, and they all kind of revolve around A words, if that helps us remember. So they revolve around aim, aware, action-oriented, and accountable. So the first one is articulating your aim. And this is what we've talked about as far as being mentally clear. So I know that the research says that 70% of college-educated Americans get their sense of identity from their jobs, right? And so that's why it's so important that we get clear about what we really want to do, right? Because you want to make sure that your why of why you're working matches your what of what you're going to actually do in the job. And so before I let Ellen Ellen dive in, I encourage all of you to, spend some time brainstorming what you might like that next phase of your career to look like. What type of work do you find meaningful, worthwhile, valuable, useful? What do you really want to accomplish through your work? Are you trying to entertain others, to make others' lives easier or better? What do you really want to accomplish, with your work? What do you want your legacy to be in your work? And then what type of job do you want to do? Do you want to do exactly what you've done before, or are you among the 83% of people who want to pivot to something different? And then last, spend some time just brainstorming about what your ideal or dream job might look like. What would be your preferred work environment? What would be your perfect type of boss? What would your dream deliverables or your dream day look like? Just spend some time using your imagination to daydream about what that ideal job might look like. So then you can start gaining some clarity around how to put, that dream, to get focused into what types of jobs you might want to look for. So Ellen, I want to turn it over to you because you've had years of experience. What is the funniest answer that a client has given you when you ask them, this question about what they wanted the next phase of their career to look like?
Well, I'm not sure I'd call it funny, but I'm going to say it's absurd.
Okay.
Is this 4-hour work week fallacy.
Okay.
That I can make $1 million working 4 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've read the 4-hour work week book, the guy talks about going on the beach, and it takes a lot of work to have your business on autopilot, right, so that you can work 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week. If somebody wants to work 25 hours a week and that's important to them, you can do it, but you can't work 4 hours a week. So I think being real,
so daydreaming, but also being realistic about what's in the realm of reality for work.
Think of what's in the realm of reality. Yeah.
Okay. So as before people create the strategic plan for their job search, do you think it matters then to get some clarity around what their actual aim is for this next phase of their career?
I do. And I liken it to target markets.
Okay.
So if you're in business, any business, you create a target market, an ideal client per se, or an ideal business market, who you're going to market to. And that's the effort and the direction you put your marketing efforts to when you reach out, so that you are attracting the people that are good fits. Okay. Now, if an opportunity comes along that's not your target market, it doesn't mean you don't do it. But that's where your focus and your energy goes. Okay. So getting clear, I think creating a target, a vision, a target market in a job search will create the same thing. It will be sure that you're attracting the right jobs, that you're led to the right jobs. And it doesn't mean that if something out of left field comes along that you hadn't thought about, of course you apply to it. Of course you try it and you consider it. But at least it helps you focus and makes your efforts much more, it doesn't spread you out. You're not going too thin, you're going deep, so you're having greater chance of result.
And I think it also it has the psychological benefit of it's putting you as the job seeker in the driver's seat, where you're saying, not I'm just going to scattershot and apply to everything that's out there, but what do I really value? What would I really like to do? And then, really, like you said, trying to dive deep into those types of jobs, I think also has the psychological benefit of giving us more of a sense of control, right? That it's not the universe or hiring managers in control of our job search, but that we are exerting some control over trying to apply to these jobs that we're really interested in. So Ellen, can you tell us, I'm sure you've helped people work through trying to gain clarity around what they might like to do in the next phase of their career. What are, how did you help them? What are 2 to 3, key questions that we can ask ourselves as we're trying to gain clarity around what we might really like to do with this next phase of our career?
So my favorite exercise is something that career coach Laura Berman Fortgang talks about in her book, 90 Days to a New Life Direction. And that's looking for the golden thread. I just want to give her credit for that. I use it with my clients all the time. And it's just to do some journaling about past jobs and past work experiences you've had. And then to go through with a highlight or a pen, and circle the things that you have in common. And
Okay.
I remember doing that exercise in like 2009. It's like, I should be a coach. It was like
Okay.
a light bulb went on, and it was so helpful.
Right.
I think it's also really helpful having someone
Hmm.
listen to you about what you love and what
Hmm.
you are doing, your past, because
Hmm.
sometimes you don't see the forest through the trees.
Right.
So there's a lot of times I'm listening to someone and I'll say, well, have you considered this? And they say,
Hmm.
no, but it's so apparent from the outside.
Right.
So think finding a safe person to
Right. A
process with
trusted
is
friend or
also
family
really
member.
super valuable.
Hmm. And I think sometimes having that outside perspective when it's not your spouse or your child, like a trusted
Yes.
friend or someone may be able to see you more clearly without the
Mhm,
limitations, that a
mhm.
spouse or a kid, might have when they're thinking about, well, what should mom do for this next phase of her career? And
Exactly.
for that golden thread exercise, I'll point out, that there are many free word cloud generators where if you're journaling on Google Docs and then you feed what you've journaled about, into a word cloud, you may find that,
Brilliant.
one big word pops out like communicating or connecting or serving, and that may help give you some clarity on figuring out what that golden thread is, that
I
connects all
am
those
going to
dots.
so steal that. That's brilliant. I would never thought about that. That's so smart.
Yeah. And then I will say, since I have helped people for 20 years with their resumes and LinkedIn profiles, the value of kind of getting clear on what is this thread that connects all of your experiences, it is really good then to verbalize that connection in the summary section of your LinkedIn profile to give people this is the thread connecting my career. So, for instance, for my own example, mine starts off with, I love to communicate and to connect with others, and that this is how it ties all my various positions together. Someone else who's maybe a STEM person might say, I really love to solve interesting and difficult quantitative problems, and this is the thread connecting it. And people love narration and stories, right? And giving them that thread can also help from the hiring manager's side to see how do all these things go together and why should I hire, Jane for this job, right? So
Right.
let's move on to the next part, that we're going to talk about, which is being self-aware. So all of us, from Philosophy 101, if you had that, Plato said, know thyself. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, and Kant said, know yourself to improve yourself. So we're talking here about being self-aware, knowing ourselves, the studies actually bear this out crazily enough. It found that people who were open to learning about themselves and their personalities were 11% more effective in their job searches than those who weren't. And I think that that's because they were able to tailor their job search strategy to what worked for their own personality, right? And so before I turn it over to Ellen, I'll give you some ideas or questions to brainstorm. For instance, are you an extrovert or are you an introvert, right? Are you going to gain energy as you're networking with other people, or are you going to gain energy while you're really quiet and you're researching those opportunities? Think about, are you learning through intuition or observation, right? If you're learning through intuition, you need to leave a lot of time to daydream and brainstorm and be creative. And if you're learning through observation, you're really going to benefit from when you're doing really concrete, broken down research. When is your energy level the highest? Are you a lark? Are you a night owl? Are you a 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. type person? What type of physical work environment is going to help you thrive? Do you need a clear surface to have a clear mind? Are you going to thrive best with a little bit of chaos? Are you going to work best at a desk, standing at your kitchen counter, walking around in the park, driving around in the car? Think about how you can tailor your job search to fit your personality. So, Ellen, I'm going to hand this over to you because I know you are so good about helping people see how to work with their personalities and really leverage those to be effective and productive. So tell me, what is the funniest way that a client has ever described their personality to you? Because I'm sure you've dealt with many people, who had funny takes on their personalities.
Well, let's see. I'm going to just figure out how to say this right. So, the last letter of the Myers-Briggs
Uh-huh.
profile, which I know DISC, I know CORE, I know Enneagram, I know
Uh-huh.
like all the profiles, but I
Right.
think like the one that best reflects how you're wired,
Mm-hmm.
and the one that to me that I like for helping people with their
Right.
productivity, because I want to understand their essence.
Right.
I don't need to know how they're communicating on their team. I need to know how they function so we create
Right.
that system. So the last letter in Myers-Briggs is a J for judger or a P for perceiver.
Uh-huh.
So this one client says, well, I'm really a P, but I can fake a J at work because the J's have to be methodical
Mhm.
and rigid and check things off and get
Right.
things done, whereas the P's are like very laissez-faire.
Uh-huh.
And so if you would imagine her say, well, it's just my Janus,
Uh-huh.
she says that about her P.
Okay.
So if you put that together,
Uh-huh.
that's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Yes. So, thinking about how, each of us probably came into the world wired differently, and that means that we're each going to approach our job search differently.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us, Ellen, about different ways that, our guests can think about how to tailor their job search to what's going to work best for them, whether they're introvert or extrovert, a lark or a night owl, learning through intuition or perception. Can you walk us through kind of what the specifics of that might look like?
Right. So you hit the first two letters of
Right.
Myers-Briggs, and I just talked about the fourth. The
Mhm.
third letter is either you're a thinker or a feeler.
Right.
And the thinker, their order of operations is task, then people, whereas the
Okay.
feeler, their order of operations is feeler, that is people, then task.
Right.
So as a thinker, it's not like I don't care deeply about people, but I
Mhm.
think about the context of I'm going to think about the task and how people support me with the task.
Okay.
Whereas the feeler
Mhm.
thinks about, I'm going to think about the people and how to use this task to support the people.
Okay.
So knowing that about yourself
Mhm.
gives you clues to how structured you like the task. And this comes
Okay.
from a behaviorist from the 1970s and 80s. His name was Fred
Okay.
Fiedler. And he talks about situational control. And
Okay.
once you know if you're task driven or
Mhm.
relationship driven, then you
Mhm.
know how much structure you need to create that right situation for you to thrive.
Okay.
So if you are people first, then
Mhm.
you want enough structure, you want
Right.
moderate structure. If you are task first, then you like high structure.
Right.
So when you figure out your Myers-Briggs, and there's all kinds of free
Mhm.
assessments online or places you can go, but if you are a thinker, I want you to come up with a very methodical
Mhm.
plan. Whereas if you're a feeler, I
Mhm.
want you to give yourself benchmarks and
Mhm.
guideposts, but you don't need to plan, because when you overplan, you feel like you're in a straitjacket and you're
Yes, you're
overwhelmed.
suffocating.
Yeah.
Well, I can, I'm sure like many of, like most people, I'm married to someone who is the opposite of me. And so I am a
Mhm.
feeler and he is the thinker. And so if I let my husband plan my job search, for instance, he give me like a 67-point checklist for every day. And I would feel like I was suffocating, and just needed to
Exactly.
pull the covers up over my head because I couldn't take that. But like you said, I kind of thrive in the moderate structure where, yes, I do need a checklist to remind me, oh, yes, I said I was going to, reach out and make some connections with a new person each day, but it doesn't need to be 67 points long, for what I need to
Can I
do.
just comment on that? I think
Uh-huh.
it's so important. To thine own self be true. Trust yourself,
Mhm.
know yourself. And if someone who loves you says, do it this way, and it's not right for you,
Right.
they need to understand that what fits them and what works for them may not fit you and may not work for you.
Right.
And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
You are exactly who you are. Let's just maximize who that
Mhm.
is and give you the best skills.
Right.
So, and the best processes, so you can go out and do your best job search you can.
And I think starting, the strategic plan by knowing ourselves, is really helpful because when we combine our knowing what our aim is and being self-aware, then we can be confident that we've structured, a job search and a plan for our job search in a way that's going to work for us. And then when our spouse or our mom or our friend is really stressed out about the fact that they would do our job
Mhm.
search very differently, we can let them know, I feel like this is going to be the best approach and the most effective approach for me, and thank you so much, for your concern. I really appreciate it. But it can give us some confidence because I think otherwise we would dive into doing the job search the way they think would be most effective.
Right. And then again, that's brilliant. You would be spending time doing things that don't fit you.
Yes.
And you would
So-
be going getting their job, not your job.
Yes.
I want you to go get your job.
I know. So I think that's why, it's the key to take time to articulate your aim. What would you really like to do for this next phase of your career? And then think deeply about yourself and what's going to be the most effective way, like you said, Ellen, to approach it. So let's talk kind of a little bit more about the nuts and bolts. So if we've articulated our aim and if we know ourselves, then the next part would be being action oriented, right? And trying to break down the job search into specific, incremental, and quantifiable steps. So, this could be a checklist. It could be a schedule. It could be, a spreadsheet. It could be whatever works for you. When I emailed everyone the link to this, I sent you a link to a spreadsheet that I've created for my own clients to help track, their job search and their networking activities. And you all are more than welcome to use that. You can go to File and make a copy to download your own copy. But I will tell you, that a good way to think about this is to kind of back out of the funnel. And so for every job you apply to, you'll have an 8.3% chance of getting interviewed for that job. And so, based on that, the most successful job seekers will apply to about 10 to 15 jobs each week. And so then if you break out from that, that means you need to apply to about 2 to 3 jobs every day. So how many jobs do you need to research? How many jobs do you need to have in your pipeline? How many companies do you need to be researching? That's kind of a good way to think about, how to get to how many, companies you need to be researching and applying for each day. And so, Ellen, I know that you've worked with clients who've tried a variety of things, to break the job search down into kind of specific and incremental and quantifiable steps. What is the value in approaching the job search like that? Instead of having one global task, which is find my new dream job, what is the value in making, it specific or incremental or quantifiable, in order to get to the goal?
So we have a saying in the productivity world, how do you eat an elephant? Well,
Okay.
it's a joke, I guess. Our question, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
And when you look at the whole picture, it's overwhelming.
Right.
And from a brain science perspective, when you feel that overwhelm, it takes you out of your thinking, creative, innovative brain, and it flips you into your emotional brain,
Right.
which is where the fight, flight, and freeze comes from, in
Right.
the amygdala. So if you look at that and say, oh, I got to get a job, you are
Right.
paralyzing yourself. You are emotionally causing trauma and moving you right into that fight, flight, and freeze. You're freezing is what really happens. So how do you keep it so you are in your most creative brain and in your most effective with your thoughts? So to break it down into small, manageable pieces.
Okay.
And to know exactly, like every single thing you're talking about with the 4As.
Right.
Those are the steps that help you see, okay, I can do this and I can do this. And to have a couple benchmarks on a weekly basis that you, like, I am a big fan of a checklist. I want you to create a list and be accountable to yourself. So we'll talk about that. But like how are you going to remember what you're supposed to do, and how are you going to be sure you're doing what you're doing? Make yourself a list that you can, so you're not inventing it all the time. I want your energy to be focused on doing that work.
Right. On the creative connections rather than trying to remember, oh yes, I
Like,
said
what
I
am I
needed
supposed
to
to do
network
now?
with 2 people,
So
today.
if you know that you're just, okay, I'm going to apply for 2 to 3 positions every day.
Right.
Okay, I can do that. It also means once you've done that, you can relax and you don't have to be stressed out all day.
Right.
Because if you don't, then you're like, oh, I didn't do it. What's wrong with me? So that's not any way to live your life. So do it, get done what your goals are for the day, and then go on with your life. So that's really beneficial.
So can you talk to us, because I'm sure, your clients have tried lots of different things, as they're managing, what their action items need to be for the job search. I would probably do best, if I had a checklist of maybe 3 or 4 things. That's,
Mhm.
research 5 companies, apply for 2 to 3 jobs and network with 1 new person. And then it had a lot of blank space so that, I had that freedom to not feel suffocated and to be creative, so that when all of a sudden I got an idea of, oh, what I should really do is upload my writing portfolio to my own website, and that would be helpful,
Mhm.
then I've got time and space to do that. But someone who's a lot more structured might do better with a really detailed, spreadsheet or something. Or, maybe there's someone who does better with handwriting everything down versus, tracking it digitally. Can you talk about some different things that your clients have tried and what kind of has worked for different personality types?
So if you are a thinker, you're going to thrive on a checklist. And if you're
Hmm.
a feeler, you're going to want benchmarks on your
Hmm.
checklist.
Okay.
So you're entirely right. Just like overall concepts of what you
Right.
want to be doing on a daily basis that you might want to check in with,
Hmm.
just once a day or something like that.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think another really important tool
Hmm.
is when an idea comes into your head.
Right.
How are you going to capture that so
Hmm.
you don't lose it?
Okay.
Okay? If Because we get great ideas, like we're
Right.
standing in the shower,
Hmm.
right? How do you not lose it? So
Okay.
they do make like waterproof dry board erasers, but
Yeah.
I have Post-its outside mine, but
Uh-huh.
and I keep like repeating. But you can use Google Tasks,
Right.
or you can use Siri, or you could, like, when I'm out, I will
Uh-huh.
email myself so I
Hmm.
don't forget something because I am
Right.
on my email.
Right.
Call yourself, leave yourself a message, whatever, write it down, whatever you need to
Uh-huh.
do. So capture it and then put it into your system so you know that you
Hmm.
can take action on it. So
And I will say,
checklist.
don't forget the low tech method that you could always write on your hand, like we did in
Oh,
elementary school if you need to. If you're
that's really
if you're a
funny.
note taker and you don't have a post-it, you could write it on the palm of your hand if you have to.
Exactly. Whatever you
Mhm.
have to do, or you find a piece of paper, whatever you have to do. So write things down. Your best ideas are coming when you're
Mhm.
probably not sitting at your desk. When
Mhm.
you're out moving, that movement creates good
Right.
creativity in your brain. Checklist, using your calendar to support you
Okay.
in
And so
terms.
is that in the sense of time blocking for, maybe one of the benchmarks is I'm going to set aside, 40 minutes each day to research potential companies or employers, or in what sense should we be using our calendar? What are some different ways we could use it?
So I'm not a big fan of like putting every detail
Uh-huh.
on your calendar because you stop seeing.
Okay.
But if you were to say, I'm going to block out from 9 to noon every day to work on my job search, I want that on your calendar.
Okay.
And then you might have your list elsewhere of what you're doing, during that time. Now, the detailed people, they're going to
Mhm.
want to say from 9 to 10, I'm doing this, from 10 to 11, I'm doing this. The
Okay.
more feely people,
Mhm.
you're going to just want to say, here are the 3 things I'm doing today
Okay.
without as much constraint. And if you
Mhm.
spent 3 hours researching Monday,
Uh-huh.
3 hours crafting cover letters and
Uh-huh.
resumes Tuesday, and 3 hours sending things Wednesday,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't matter as long as you're reaching the benchmarks
Right.
that you've created for yourself. So how you do it, you've got to figure out what's best for you.
And is there
So block
some
out
value
chunks.
in maybe putting your very highest priority on the calendar so you can get support or buy-in from your spouse or your co-parent or your roommate, where I don't know, something about having it on the calendar makes it kind of official. And then if you've got young kids and you're job searching, you can have that conversation with your partner and say, I really need your support on Tuesday and Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. I really need to focus, on applying for these. Could you help me by taking care of dinner and tucking the kids in or whatever you need, to make that happen?
100%. And one of the things I highly recommend is family meetings or
Uh-huh.
roommate meetings. Like
Mhm.
my son Max in New York City has 3 roommates, and they've been
Right.
in that little New York City
On
cubicle
top of each
for
other for a long
months.
time. Yeah.
So I, when I would teach, I would always go over our coach, I would always go
Right.
over my calendar with my husband so that he would know when I need him to be quiet. especially when I was like recording a call or teaching.
Right.
So we got in the habit of like Sundays reviewing calendars, family meeting. So I think family meeting, even if it's 5 minutes or printing out your calendars and sharing them, roommate meetings, whatever, unless you're living alone, it's really valuable to share your needs with your colleague, your housemate, roommate, whatever it is, so people can support each other.
And I know that, searching for a job is incredibly stressful for the people who are going through it, but I know it also has a trickle down effect on our, spouse and our kids. So maybe it also helps relieve some stress if they can see, you have a plan, for how you're executing this. And, these are kind of the steps you're taking this week. I think instead of them just kind of wondering all the time, I wonder how the job search is going. If it's kind of communicated at intervals, I think it probably brings down, the stress in that household, for how is it going.
Like completely, like what a great idea, because it takes not only the stress off of your partner and the people who care, but it also takes the stress off of you because you know that you've communicated. Now you don't have to do anything except focus on doing what you need to do. And I would say that probably applies to your mom, even though she may not live with you.
So you're not getting, 7 calls, every day. How is the job search going? I talked
Tell
to
them on
my
Sunday.
orthodontist,
Say, Mom, I'm going to report to you on Sunday.
Yeah.
Exactly. Take care of yourself, you guys.
Yeah. So I think that brings us right into our last, action item, and then we'll have room for questions at the end. And this last one is on being accountable, which we've talked a little bit about, but let's dive more deeply into it. I know that Ellen will agree that all of the goal setting research says that, there are 3 steps, to successfully achieving your goals. And the first one is to write it down. The second one is making sure that the goal is broken down into specific and incremental and quantifiable parts, like we've been talking about. And the third one is to update a friend once a week, on what you've done towards that goal. And, people who updated a trusted friend on their goals achieve 33% more goals than people who didn't. So it's a huge value in being accountable. And so I would encourage you all, pick, a kind, supportive friend to do this. Your spouse is probably not the right person because they're feeling their own stress, from you looking for a job. And so, commit, with this trusted friend, who cares about you and will, support you. Can I update you, once a week on, how many positions did I apply for? How many applications, have I submitted and where are they each at in the pipeline? How many people did I reach out to? What did I do to grow my network? Just maybe have a quick checklist of things that you should check in with an accountability partner once a week. So Ellen, I want to turn it over to you. Are there creative ways that clients have built accountability into their goal seeking? And what do you think really makes for an effective accountability partner?
Yes. So I just do want to talk about hiring somebody to be your accountability partner.
Sure.
Because that could be a coach, it could be a consultant. I mean, someone like what Brooke offers in career advice is probably like really wise, because when I coach with my clients, they get an hour dedicated to them. It is the kindest, most generous gift you can give to yourself. And it's for many, many things.
Right.
And, coaching is different than therapy. Therapy is like looking back. Coaching's looking forward. What are we going to do to create that intentional life for you? And here's one time that you've got, like, my only job is my client's success.
Right.
It's the only thing that defines my success. I'm only there for them. So if that's a need, and I'm not even like in anything in life, just know that that would be a tremendous gift.
Right. And to think about it, like you said, as a gift to yourself and your future, I mean, not to, be holiday driven, but, so many of our friends and family members are now asking us, well, what do you want for Christmas? And perhaps this is something that we can think of as a gift to ourselves, for the next year is, if we're feeling like we need to go beyond a trusted friend to hire some professional advice, whether it's on the resume and LinkedIn profile writing front or just the coaching and thinking through, what this plan looks like, to think about that as a gift to ourselves.
However, there are ways to use your friends,
of course,
or colleagues, or whatever the people in your lives.
Right.
And, it doesn't work for people to feel babysat,
Right.
because you're going to push back from that.
Uh-huh.
But I would, tell somebody what you need.
Okay.
I'm going to email you every Monday and let you know I hired a book coach. Okay.
Okay.
So this works for me. I email her every Monday and let her know how many hours I wrote.
Okay.
What it does, it helps me keep track of my hours. Plus, if there's something that comes up, I could include that. So when we have a call, we could talk about it. So I can make progress on that. But I also have mastermind groups that we hop on the phone and we just talk things through in a very safe space. That's really interesting. And bring 3 or 4 colleagues together and just meet once every month for an hour, and everyone gets 15 minutes to talk, or 2 hours, or every 2 weeks, whatever it is. But so I think those are things you can do to be accountable, but just ensure that you're not being babysat, because that's not going to serve you.
Right.
But treat it like you're a mature, responsible adult, and here's just somebody that I can talk things through with, or use as a sounding board, not as a babysitter.
So if people are on a budget and they're, needing to look within their friend circle for someone who could be their accountability partner, what type of person should we really look for? What are kind of the key traits that you think, really makes someone a good accountability partner?
A good listener.
Okay.
A non-judgmental colleague, friend.
Okay.
You don't want somebody, remember I was just saying that you don't want somebody to make you feel like you're babysitter. If they tell you what to do, that's their job search. You just want somebody who's going to listen to you. We all like to fix things. That's not what we're going for here. You need a safe place to process. Let them know. If I have a question, I will ask.
Okay.
Otherwise, I just want you to listen.
Okay.
So just someone you feel very safe with, that you know they're not going to judge you.
And does it tend to work best to have a weekly accountability check-in by phone, by email, some combination, like a walk? What tends to work best?
I think what works best for you.
Okay.
So some people love a phone check-in.
Okay.
Some people love an email check-in, and some people like a combination.
Okay.
Some people like texts, just text me.
Yeah.
So I will have a client say, I will offer, can you just check in with me on Friday? So they'll get an email that says, checking in, how's it going?
Okay.
I'm not doing any more than that. So what they do with it's up to them.
Okay.
So just make it support you. It should not cause you any angst.
Okay. And what should when we're kind of setting up, with this friend or coach or whoever it is, what tends to work well when we miss an accountability check-in? Is it best if the accountability partner reaches out and says, hey, I haven't heard from you, it's Monday, or what tends to work well in that?
Yeah, that's great. Or, hey, just checking in. Or a text, just checking in, what's up, or thinking of you. Oh, I'm supposed to check in with Brooke today, So, just something that keeps them out of their fight, or freeze amygdala, that causes you to feel judged, feel anxious, feel stressed.
And lets them know they have a sounding board who's rooting for them and encouraging them, and is wanting the best for them.
Exactly.
Okay. Any final thoughts on, what is one thing that people could do to improve their job search, just on a global basis before we turn it over to Q&A? Any final thoughts on one change that people could make that you think would really help make their job searches more effective?
Don't apply for jobs that don't fit you.
Okay.
No matter how desperate you are.
That sounds like a key to life happiness.
Pardon?
It sounds like a key to life happiness, since we, 70% of us get our identity from work. And so we really do want that what we're doing at work to align with who we want to be.
And I will tell you, Brooke, a lot of my clients are reading applications and looking at them. They don't want those applications that don't fit. It's just a waste of everyone's time and resources. Then you get frustrated. Nobody responded to me. If you are more focused And that's the whole point of that plan.
Mhm.
And know what the fits are and know what you're going for. You're going to get a
Mhm.
much better result in your search.
Well, that is
And
great.
wait, I got
Oh,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing to say.
One more thing.
One more thing. I
Yes.
remember many years ago, I had this young woman. I was a
Mhm.
front office manager. I was hiring a front desk clerk.
Okay.
I wasn't hiring a front desk clerk. I got this amazing resume, and she called me on Friday,
Okay.
and she said, and that's when we answered the phone. This was a long time ago, and
Uh-huh.
she said, I just was following up, and I said
Mhm.
to her, I'm sorry, I don't have a job for you. I would love to talk with you.
Right.
I don't have a job.
Mhm.
Saturday, somebody gave their 2 weeks notice.
Oh.
And on Monday, when she called me back to check in, or the next week to check
Uh-huh.
in, I had a job for her. So it
Right.
may have nothing to do with you. It may
Mhm.
be all about timing.
Right.
And just because they get a no from somebody on Friday doesn't mean the next
Right.
Friday you're going to get a no. Things
Mhm.
change all the time.
Right.
Timing matters.
And to trust that the right job will come around at the right time, right?
Timing
Well,
matters.
let's open it up for questions. I don't see any questions right now in our chat, but feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question if you all have it, because we would welcome your questions for me or for Ellen. Are there any questions that anyone has before we wrap up the webinar? I'll give you guys just a few seconds to scratch your heads and see if you have any other questions. If you do, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask those questions or drop them in the chat. Okay, any last questions before I wrap up? Okay, well, Ellen, we must have done a good job because it looks like we don't have any questions. One more time, can you tell people where they can find you just in case they popped on a little late? Oh,
Sure.
Alyssa had a comment for us and she said, thank you so much for the advice. She appreciates it. Thank you so much, Alyssa. We appreciate that. Ellen, can you remind everyone where they can find you if they've got any other questions that come to them after this?
Sure.
Okay, Ellen just dropped her email address in the chat.
And if you want, my website's ellenfay.com. So if you want to learn more about what I do, if you know somebody that, so-and-so could use a productivity coach.
Right.
That's what I do. And productivity, leadership, business, it all blends together. It's just what I do.
Of course. And everyone, I am Brooke Kent of Brooke Writes It. You got my emails when you registered. You're always welcome to check me out, or if you know anyone who needs help with their resume or their LinkedIn profile or their interview coaching, I'm always happy to do that. We thank Ellen so much for joining us as our guest expert for today's webinar. And just to plug that for my December webinar, I'll be talking to a former high-level athlete who's now a coach on helping people think through big career transitions, like athletes have to make when they go from playing volleyball professionally, to doing something completely different. Those same kind of lessons and principles apply to the rest of us when we're making, a career pivot, although we may not be going from playing professional beach volleyball, to doing sales or something else. So thank you all so much for your time. I will send you all a link to the recording and the infographic. But Ellen, thank you again for your time. We so appreciate having you today.
Thank you for having me, Brooke. This was really fun, and best of luck to all of you guys.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for everyone who joined us, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.